Yeah, if you want to fill out, if you run into questions, actually that's not a bad idea at all. He's got one there, and if you find anything that I'm talking about that you'd like clarified, scribble it on one of those little pieces of paper and hand it up here, and I'll try to go through them all. I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. Try to shorten things up a little bit. I gave a very long version of this speech at the Libertarian Party Okaloosa County's meeting, and had a lot of charts and multimedia stuff to go with it. We don't have the ability to do that here. And things have changed anyway. Everybody's heard about Greece, right? Essentially bankrupt, okay? Everybody's been watching television. You saw what the Greeks thought of the idea that they would just have the government take away some of the largesse that they've been handing out, right? I mean, a little demonstration, burning a couple of bank buildings seemed like a really good idea. You could probably legitimately call what went on over there a riot. Although, I don't know, the last time that I saw a riot was the stuff that went on out in LA, and somehow it just didn't seem like they were really up to it. And maybe they need some lessons from some of our gangbangers over here in the United States on how to throw a proper one. But certainly when you have thousands of people in the streets protesting, and it's a very spontaneous kind of thing, and it was, you have to say, hey, wait a minute, what happened here? All right, how many people in this room think we have come out of recession, that we're actually in a recovery? Anybody? Oh, we got a bunch of people here that are wise. The government, folks, in 2000, when we had the technology stock market crash, all of these companies that, pets.com never had a business plan that was going to make a penny of profit, but they sold billions and billions of shares of stock to people, probably including some folks in this room, that ended up with nothing. After that happened, our government came in and did what the Keynesian guys think you should do whenever there's a recession, that is, spend a bunch of money. We'll just borrow money and we'll give it to people and the citizens. We'll come up with new programs, new ways to blow cash. One of the signature items on that list was Medicare Part D. Some of you may be taking advantage of it in this room today. We built into our economy after 2000 $500 billion a year of deficit spending. It never went away. The entire supposed recovery from 2003 to 2007 was false. It was built upon fraud and upon the belief that everyone in this room, all of your homes, were going to double, triple, quadruple in value, go up in value by 20% a year forever. Of course, the government loved this because every time you sold one of these houses, the taxes went up, right? And so local and state governments, they thought that was a grand idea. Hey, listen, this house was $200,000, and then this person sells it, so he loses his homestead exemption here in Florida. The next person that buys it, he pays $300,000 for it. Oh, we get to reassess it at $300,000. And they bought fire engines, and they bought police cars, and they bought a brand new wing for Blue Water Elementary in which they put $30,000 smart boards in every one of the new classrooms. Oh wait, I thought we didn't have any money for teachers, but they happened to, they came up with this, and oh, by the way, that wasn't good enough. They also hung plasma televisions in the corner of every one of those rooms. My daughter went to this school. Guess what that television displays all but 20 minutes of the instructional day? Anybody? Does anybody know? Oh, no, it does. A clock. Exactly. Instead of a $10 clock from Walmart, they have a $1,000 television screen on the wall that literally displays the clock. Oh, they've changed? They turn it off now?
Yes. They use the television now for dismissal.
Oh, well, gee, that's even better. So now we got a $1,000 television that has nothing on it. All right. So,
There are options where you can take videos and things.
I know, but I also know what was normally on it. Okay, it gets better. Right over here at Ruckle Middle School, this year, more than $10,000 spent to buy, wait for it, video games, specifically Dance Dance Revolution machines, because dodgeballs are too brutal these days to hand to the kids and have them get some physical education by actually going out and exercising. So instead, we're going to buy $10,000 worth of video games, which consist of, again, Wii consoles, little dance pads, and, again, nice, expensive flat panel televisions, which they then had to mount behind plexiglass so they don't get smashed by things flying around in the gymnasium. Folks, this is where our tax money goes. Greece got bailed out supposedly by Spain. Spain's broke too. Now, the last time I checked, if you're bankrupt, you can't bail out somebody else who's also bankrupt, right? Because you're going to have a little trouble getting the money in order to give to them. So we do this little shell game where we say, well, you know, we're going to rescue these guys, and that's going to make everything okay. But the only people that have an economy in Europe right now that's actually producing anything is the Germans. They're pretty much it. And everyone says, well, you know, Greece lied to get in the European Union. They falsified the books. Oh, you mean like Bill Clinton that took the Social Security and Medicare tax money and stole it so he claimed he ran a budget surplus? That kind of lying? Oh, by the way, it wasn't just Bill Clinton that did it. George Bush did it too, for 8 years straight. He never told the truth either. And the best part of it is, all of the nations over in Europe knew Greece was doing this. So now they cry poverty, now they cry havoc, let loose the winds of austerity, and the people say, nuts. All right. A couple of weeks ago you saw a flash crash. Everyone's probably heard of that. 1,000 points down in the stock market, literally almost instantaneously. I was sitting in front of my computer terminal when it happened. You probably believe that there's actually been a recovery in the stock market, that people actually have bought stocks from March of last year up until today. You'd be wrong. In fact, the statistics say otherwise. The people that got screwed in 2000 got wise. They didn't buy anything. Hey, listen, you'll fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So how come the market went from 666 on the S&P 500, and that's a funny number, isn't it? Where have I seen that one before? All the way up to about 1,200. How did that happen? Well, what happened is these banks, these same banks that we gave $700 billion of our taxpayer money to, that we bailed out, that made all these bad bets and we're all going to go bankrupt, they took these shares of stock, Apple, General Electric, all these other companies, and passed them back and forth between each other at 1 penny higher prices all the way up the line. But there was never really anybody there to buy, and so when people started to sell, the market went down 1,000 points in 5 minutes. By the way, people still haven't bought, which means it can and will happen again. That's a problem. So, what's coming over here to America if we don't solve these problems? Well, let's put some things in perspective and put some numbers on this. Everyone talks about $12, $13 trillion worth of government debt, right? This is what we're all told all the time. That number's a lie too. There's $53 trillion outstanding in debt right now between federal, state, local government, financial institutions, and people just like you and I with mortgages, credit cards, car loans, and whatever else have you. $53 trillion worth of debt and $14 trillion worth of gross domestic product. That is the sum total of everything we produce in our country. But that $14 trillion is false too, because the government is $1.5 trillion of it by borrowing money they didn't collect in taxes to prop up the numbers and make you feel good. How long does this go on? Well, Iceland found out that it went on right up until the moment that it didn't. And then their economy and their currency collapsed all at once in the space of about 24 hours. The same thing happened in Greece, except their currency couldn't collapse because it was the same currency everybody else had over in Europe, so they just had their economy fall apart, and their government was having to pay 18, 19% to borrow for 1 year, which of course is kind of like your credit card when you lose your job and don't have any money coming in, isn't it? You know, funny how that happens. You lose your job and everything seems to be okay because you go out and you party it up, right? You got your plastic, the magic cards, until somebody figures out that you can't pay them and all of a sudden the interest rate goes to the moon and they cut you off. Well, that's what happened over in Europe. That can and will come to the United States if we don't stop this. Let's put some real facts on this. We could take every discretionary program in the federal budget, all of them. Education, agriculture, all of the different programs. And by the way, back there in that corner is a time capsule containing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Nowhere in there do I see Department of Agriculture as a federal power. Nowhere do I see Department of Education as a federal power. So let's say that we take those things out, we wipe them off the books, we're still $1 trillion a year in the hole. Let's say that we decide that we're not going to have a military anymore because, well, you know, we don't really have anybody trying to blow up any of our buildings, right? That's not real. So we'll just bring all those guys home and forget about that. There'll probably be a war over in the Middle East in about, I don't know, 3 hours after we make that decision. And then we won't have any oil, and you'll have a problem going to the gas station to fill your car up, right? That wouldn't balance the budget either. Here's the ugly facts. If we don't get rid of Social Security and Medicare, we can't fix this. Nobody wants to hear that. Here's another nasty little piece of information. It's been ruled that you paid a tax. You're not entitled to anything. I'm never going to get a dime of the money I paid in. I already know that. I'm not yet 50. By the time I turn 65, there will be no Social Security and there will be no Medicare. It isn't going to exist. Now, President Obama would like you to believe that there will be some kind of new socialist healthcare system that you'll be able to get in, and you can keep your healthcare plan if you like the one that you have. Yeah, right, okay. Nobody said what it was going to cost. You can keep it, it might be $5,000 a month. If you have $5,000 a month. The reality of it is this, folks. We have a champagne taste and a beer budget in this country. Okay? We like to believe that we can pick up the phone and we can call anybody at any time and get whatever it is that we want. We like to think that we can have homes that are investments instead of a place to hang your hat, a place to take a shower and go to sleep. That they're supposed to go up in value and become something that we then live on when we retire and are heirlooms that we leave to our children. We like to believe that the stock market should always go up because, you know, that's what we were told, right? Invest for the long term. How many times have you heard this? We've also heard, if you watch CNBC, you hear this commercial 4 or 5 times a day. Central banks are printing more money. No, they're not. No, they're not. Our government has borrowed and spent $4 trillion in the last 2.5 years. Didn't print anything. Guess what? We're not alone. How long does this go on in the United States? I do not know. But if we do not change the general bent of our government to be something that is more akin to what's sealed in that time capsule back there, and take all of these other programs and kick them back to the states and the local governments where we can actually vote on them and have some say on what goes in and what we pay and get back out, we're going to have what happened in Greece come here. We're going to have what happened in Iceland come here. And it is going to come fast and hard and without warning. If I could put an exact time on this, I'd be wealthier than Bill Gates when it was all over. Because it's very easy if you know exactly when this is going to happen to make a fortune in the markets. I'm not that good a prognosticator. My crystal ball's a little cloudy. I didn't think the government would get away with doing this for the last 2.5 years. I thought they might get away with this kind of deficit spending for about 12 months. I was wrong. They got away with it for 2.5 years and they're still doing it. Never in my wildest dreams did I believe that we could manage to borrow and spend 11% of our gross domestic output on an ongoing, perpetual basis The CBO says they're going to keep doing it. And they're conservative. They're always wrong, on the low side. All right? So we have not just the guesses from people like me, we have the supposedly nonpartisan government offices saying this is what's going to happen, and yet people keep loaning us money, and they will do it right up until the point that they don't think they're going to get paid. And that is when it will end. We can fix it in this country, but we can't fix it by promising people things that they didn't pay for. The unfortunate reality is that we have outgrown our ability to pay for what we want. And we're going to have to learn to accept and live with that in every aspect of our lives. When people talk about the Tea Party, they talk about return to the rule of law. Okay? That's grand. All of these guys in Wall Street and in Washington, D.C., they ripped every one of you in this room off. They stole anywhere between tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars from you, depending on your particular station in life. It's gone. You're never going to get it back. But if I rob you of a couple of $1,000 with some swindle, I go to jail. These people, they get a bonus. And they get bailed out. We haven't stopped doing that. Back in the early 1980s, when Paul Volcker was in charge of the Federal Reserve, Latin America, Mexico, Argentina, other countries down there, got in a similar sort of trouble as Greece and Iceland have had now. The banks had too much of their debt and they were insolvent. And Volcker told them, I will let you lie about the value of your balance sheets, that is, the assets and the liabilities that you have, for a short period of time. You will either clean this up or you will be put out of business, because when my forbearance ends, we're going to tell the truth. And if the truth is you're bankrupt, guess what? Too bad, goodbye. They believed him and they did it. This time we did the same thing. Henry Paulson marched into Congress. He pulled Pelosi, Reid, everybody else in the room and said, $700 billion or the ATM machine doesn't work tomorrow. Literally, he threatened our government with tanks in the streets, folks. Literally. He said they would have to declare martial law. Now, if I walk into the federal building somewhere and say, give me $700 billion or the tanks roll, Mr. Denninger, come over here. All right. Of course, that's not what happened, right? But what did the banks do with it this time? Did they clean things up? Did they sell things off? Did they get rid of all this garbage? No. They paid out over $100 billion in compensation last year. $100 billion. So the money was squandered. The problem is still there. Now we've seen it start to hit over in Europe, and the odds are very high it's going to come here. And what that means is everybody needs to prepare for a very hard rain. You know, we all get ready for hurricanes around here once in a while, right? We get the storm warnings, we put up our shutters, we maybe get some gas for the generator, get some food. You either decide to leave or you decide to hunker down and ride it out. Economically, that's what we're looking at. And I see no evidence that either party, and folks, this is not a partisan thing, okay? Please understand, John McCain suspended his campaign to go back to Washington to turn the TARP vote into a campaign speech. He not only voted for it, he campaigned on it. All right? So before you say vote Republican, don't vote for Obama, realize that the other guy sold you down the river when his party was in power. All right? That's not to say President Obama's any better. Please don't get me wrong. But we will not solve this problem by saying vote Republican or vote Democrat. Because the facts of the matter are, both of them will take the bribes from the guys up on Wall Street to strip every penny of your money that they can, and they'll be gone to Paraguay in their jets, or they'll be holed up in some armed compound while you starve. And they don't care. We are supposed to have a rule of law in this country. There are two sets of laws. There's one that applies to everyone in this room, and then there's the ones that apply to the people in Washington and in New York. That has to stop. And whatever has to be done to make it stop has to happen. If that means that we have to go on national strikes in this country and stop producing so they cannot collect taxes, then that's what it means. If it means that we have to elect people that aren't Democrats or Republicans to offices, then that's what it means. But if we don't do something about this soon, and our credit card gets revoked, we will be Greece. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not inclined to riot, but I certainly don't want to be the guy in the bank when the riots okay? Because they burned 3 of those people up over there. So let's not go down that road in America. Let's find a way to fix this problem. And that means you can't say, but my guy brought the break-in home. You know, we hear all the time, Congress, I hate Congress, they're horrible. 20% approval ratings or something like this, the latest that I saw. Let me ask a question. How many people here in this room voted for a representative or a senator who voted for TARP? Anyone? This was a couple of years ago. All right? 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks, folks, before the election, they voted to steal $700 billion of your money and give it to the people in New York. And nearly all of them were reelected to office. Virtually every one of the people who voted for that bill and passed it kept their job. You want to know what the problem is? Get up and go look in the mirror. Because as long as we continue to do that, I want my Social Security, I want my Medicare, I want my Section 8 housing, I want my food stamps, I want this, I want that. The other guy can't have his, but I'm going to get mine. As long as we vote that way, and that's what we're doing as a nation, we will be Greece. Guaranteed. We cannot continue to spend 11% of our gross domestic product beyond what we produce by borrowing it from the Chinese. Yeah, we'll get away with it for a little while longer. But one day, not too long from now, you're going to wake up, the stock market's going to be down 3,000 points, and the truck that's supposed to come to the store to bring your food isn't going to show up because there's no fuel for the driver, and he's in Albuquerque. And he can't fill his truck up because his credit card doesn't work anymore. That's what's going to happen. And we need to think about how we're going to deal with it in this country before it comes here. Because I don't want to go through that, and I have a daughter, she's 13, and I don't want her to go through it either. Choice is ours. Questions? No, it's not apocalypse now yet. Yeah.
Just a comment. It seems like, you know, you hit on with my guy bringing home the bacon when it comes to re-electing. You know, we all take this philosophy, well, let's throw out the current people in Congress. But that doesn't apply to our guy because he's bringing the stuff home to us. But them other 535, they got to go.
Well, take a look at what happened. You know, I live in Alan Boyd's district, okay, which is, you know, the nightmare from Elm Street, all right? I mean, I get Freddy Krueger every time I try to call his office. He actually won't talk to me anymore. He got so upset with me faxing him like every 15 minutes during the bailout bill. Hey, you know, you gotta tell him what you want him to do, right? I mean, you can't if you don't give direction, you can't complain. Here's the problem, all right? The people in his district, you know, largely agrarian, right? I mean, plus Tallahassee, of course, we know how they vote over there. But he has people in his family that benefit tremendously from the agricultural stuff that he works on. All right? They're never going to vote him out of office because it's free money coming out of the government. All right? I hate to pick on my father, but I'm going to. He was vehemently in favor of Medicare Part D. He's got lots of money. He doesn't care. He doesn't care that my daughter's going to have to pay for it. She was born at that point, too. He didn't care. He knows, and by the way, he's a CPA by trade, which means he understands the math. Okay? He's for it anyway. I mean, I understand people that aren't educated and don't get it and don't understand why it can't work. Okay? And they say, well, you know, this looks good. I get that. Somebody who actually understands it and just doesn't care, that's a different story entirely. But that's what we're facing in this country. And it's the same thing. By the way, we're not any different than the people over there in Europe. They voted for this stuff for 30, 40 years, just like we have, and now they're reaping what they asked for. They're getting exactly the government they deserve, and so are we. All right, you can't complain. If you send these people to office and then they do exactly what you believe they're going to do, you cannot complain about the facts. All right, we got a couple of questions. Should there be a Federal Reserve System? I know where that one came from. Here's the problem, folks. A lot of people think that if we went back to a gold-based currency that we would fix all of this, that inflation, deflation, the borrow and spend stuff would all go away. It's wrong. We had the worst depression in our nation's history on a gold standard. And no, it wasn't 1930s. It was the one before that, 1873. We were on hard money. We never left it. And people say 1930s doesn't count because FDR, of course, confiscated all the gold and, essentially started devaluing the currency at that point. But here's the problem, folks. If you're on a gold standard, you fix the quantity of money because it's convertible to hard metal at some point, right? But that's not where the problem is. Why are we in trouble right now? Anyone, come on. I just spent half an hour talking about it. And how do you do that? How do you, I heard it over here. You borrow it. All right? How does hard currency stop you from running up huge amounts of credit in the economy? The answer is it doesn't. And that's where the problem comes from. That's what causes these kinds of economic collapses. It is not misregulation of the currency supply. It is misregulation of the credit supply. And by the way, if you read the Federal Reserve Act, every one of the governors ought to be in prison right now. Go read it. It does not, you know how you always, have you ever heard them say, sustainable maximum employment with stable prices? This is what they claim, right? This is what you always hear on television. This is all the talking heads say this. That's a lie. What the Federal Reserve Act says is that the Federal Reserve is charged with regulating credit aggregates. That's because credit is where the problem is. But they didn't regulate credit aggregates, did they, when anyone that could breathe could go get a loan to buy a $5 million house? They didn't regulate anything. Every one of these people ought to be in jail right now. And the reason they're not is because that law does not contain an or else. Every other law in the book for you and I, if I go rob a bank, it says, thou shalt not rob banks, and if you rob a bank, you do 20 years in prison. Okay? So there's an or else in there. But the Federal Reserve Act says, you shall do this and you shall not do that, but there's no penalty clause after the shall not. Okay? There's another law called prompt corrective action. All these banks that are being seized around the country that are generating these huge losses for the FDIC. There was a law that was put in place after the S&L crisis that is supposed to make that impossible. It's called prompt corrective action, and it contains the word shall something like 37 times, and the word may, I believe, twice. But nowhere in there, at the end of it, does it say, or else Sheila Bair goes to prison for 10 years if she doesn't do this. Okay? So, they just ignore it. And this goes back again. You got a document back there that works perfectly fine, but the rule of law has to apply to everybody. You can have all the laws in the books, but if there is no penalty clause that goes along with violations, then people are going to do whatever they want. All right. So, no, getting rid of the Federal Reserve wouldn't fix it unless you have to have some entity that regulates the credit supply in the economy based upon gross domestic product and output, and it has to be transparent, above board. Everything's out in the open, and I don't care whether you call it the Federal Reserve, which, and by the way, that is their job. That's what they're supposed to do. I don't care if you call it the Federal Reserve. I don't care if it's a computer in a corner. As long as every citizen can see everything that is done and verify that they actually are not allowing credit to grow faster than gross domestic product. As long as that happens, there is no problem. There's also no inflation and no deflation. That doesn't suit certain people very well, so that's why they hide things. But you give the control of those credit aggregates to Barney Frank, and I guarantee you it'd be worse than what you have right now with Bernanke. Right? I'm no fan of Bernanke, don't get me wrong, but if you gave it to Barney Frank, it'd be 100 times worse. Right? So, you know, throwing something out is not always the right answer. The right answer is to figure out what's wrong and fix it. All right, gold, bonds, cash, what now, when? You can't eat gold. People have used it as a medium of exchange and a store of value for a long time, but at what price? You buy stocks when they're cheap and you sell them when they're expensive, right? Gold has more than doubled in price in the last couple of years. Is it a bubble? I don't know. Okay? There are people that claim it's going to $5,000 an ounce. There are people that believe it's going to $500 an ounce. If you bet wrong, you're going to lose your shirt. I believe we are facing deflation, not inflation in this country. I believe it's a matter of mathematics. There's too much debt in the system, and they cannot possibly print or borrow enough money to stop it. They tried. That's why we got the huge rally off the 666 lows in March of 2009 in the stock market. Now, all of the fraud and the games that they tried to pull are coming back to roost. It's too late to get involved in the long end of the bond market, that is the longer duration bonds. They've already collapsed in yield, which means the prices have gone up. So again, you're buying a top. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If we are going to have inflation, cash is king. I'm sorry, deflation. If house prices go from $500,000 to $50,000 and you have $50,000 in cash, you just bought yourself a house. You got 10 times the leverage out of the money that you would have previously had to have. That's fantastic. If you believe there's a chance that we will have a Weimar Germany kind of hyperinflationary blow-off, and there are a lot of people out there that think that's going to happen, that at some point the Federal Reserve will basically be junked. Someone like Barney Frank will take control of the printing presses and just turn them on. All right? That is not an impossible scenario, by the way. Hopefully you'll get enough warning if it happens that you can take some actions. If that does happen, the problem with metals in that scenario is that they're taxed as a collectible. So if gold goes up in price nominally at the same rate of inflation, if that sort of a thing was to happen, you'd end up having to pay 30% or more in tax to the government, so you just lost anyway. The government always finds a way to mess with you. I mean, it's, you know, it's the same thing. People say, well, you know, my house went up in value. Yeah, you had to pay capital gains tax on the price of the house. So you have to stay within their system somehow. And frankly, I tend to be rather sophisticated about this. I think that if you're going to get hyperinflation, you want to be in the equity markets, but you want to be in with leveraged and defined risk, much like an insurance policy. You buy an insurance policy on your house. If there's no fire, you lose the money. If there's a fire, you get paid. Okay? You can buy options in the equity markets out 2 to 3 years on the equity markets going very much to the upside. If that doesn't happen, you lose the money you put in, but nothing more. If we have a hyperinflationary blow-off like Zimbabwe had, okay, you're going to have the equity market over there went nuts. Stock prices went to the moon. Of course, the currency wasn't worth anything, but, you know. But the thing is you get leverage, which means you get a multiplier on your money, and at the same time, you know, so you can try to stay ahead after you pay the taxes, which is the important point. Because, look, folks, it doesn't matter how much cash you have on paper. What matters is how much you get to keep after the government gets their piece. And they are going to find a way to take as much of it as they can. If things get really bad, tax rates will go up substantially. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that the top marginal rate was 90% in this country. All right, they will do that again. So, you know, I mean, it doesn't do you any good to hold an investment that goes up in value by 1,000%, 10 times, and then the government takes 90% of it. You didn't make anything. Right? So that's the, you know, that's the danger, is you're basically placing bets on what the government's going to do. And don't ask me. I mean, when it comes to Obama and what's going on right now in the Congress, when they run into funding problems, I do not have any doubt that they will try to squeeze every penny they can out of everyone that they can possibly get it from. One of the things that I expect them to try, by the way, is I do believe there's a good possibility we'll see another market crash, that we will end up lower than the 666 number in the S&P 500 that we were about a year ago. I'm actually expecting that we could see the S&P 500 trade down into the 300s and the Dow in the 3000s. At that point, they will probably go to you and say, you know, you lost all this money in your 401k, but if you convert it into treasury bills, 30-year treasury bills that you can't cash until you retire, we'll put the money back. The problem is for most people that's actually a screw job because the interest rate on those treasuries at that point will be about 2%. And then immediately the cost of their funding will start to go up and the value of those bonds will go down. You will get hosed, but I'm willing to bet that 9 out of 10 Americans will take that deal. And that will be the last grab that they make before the wheels come off in the government. If they do that, get ready because things are going to get really bad about 4 or 5 years after that because that's the last attempt they can make to try to tap that last reservoir of cash. And they'll do it. But people that have a brain will not go for it, but it'll sell. Believe me, it'll sell. When you've seen 75% of your retirement account go away, it'll sell. So, anything else? Other questions? All right, you can, yeah, in the back.
Well, I apologize. I'm new to the area, and it's my first Tea Party. I'm 80. But you were talking about the school system. I'm from Arizona, and a similar thing happened there. I know the housing market in the Broward County was hit pretty hard, just like it was in Arizona. And one of the things that the state did is they spent that money like crazy, on homes, stuff like that. And now that they're in the same position that I assume this place is with the teachers losing their jobs, right? Because of the budget. Is that kind of going on?
Well, the threats have been made. I don't know that they've been cutting too many people yet, but.
Okay, well, Arizona, instead of scaling back, because they had taxes coming in like crazy because they're building like crazy.
Right.
Selling houses like crazy. Now teachers are getting their jobs. Basically, well, they were going to lose their jobs, and they hiked up the sales tax by 1 cent to fix it over there. Supposedly fix it. Yeah, where have we heard that one before? Yeah, where have we heard that proposal before? There's something funny about that. I seem to remember something like that on a ballot. I'm sorry, it's kind of a long-winded question. The school spent all this money on these TVs that are useless. Why don't they just sell them? Just like any of us would.
Well, because they're not worth anything anymore. Look at the price of a computer 3 days after you buy it. Okay, the problem with all of this is that this is all this spending is fine and well when you have lots of cash, but governments have this. The military does this too. Anyone who's been in the service knows this. If you have $100,000 budgeted, you have to spend all $100,000. You can't leave 10 cents because if you do, the next year you will have $99,999. Okay, so that's what happens, and it happens in local government as well, everywhere. If you have a $100,000 budget, you spend every last dime before that fiscal year is over, and so budgets never go down.
Okay, so it would show up, see a red shirt saying you have to be in your budget, you have to stay in your budget. No, look. Who here has had their house price go up in the last 2 years? Anybody? All right. Why is it that if your home price if the value of your house, according to Zillow or an appraisal, or the appraiser for that matter, has gone down by 30%, why hasn't your tax bill gone down by 30%? My tax bill's gone up.
That taxable value is still less than that.
I understand, but here's the thing. The money that you make goes down in a recession, right? When the economy's bad. Your income goes down. Why shouldn't the government's income go down?
Well, it does, but their spending doesn't.
Well, but it's not. That's the point, is that the federal government, look, the states cannot spend beyond what they take in. They just find ways to get more, and then when they don't have enough, they borrow it from the feds. The unemployment program in Florida and many other states is actually broke. They're borrowing billions of dollars from the federal government because the state itself cannot run a budget deficit. Okay? But why is it that if everybody else has to tighten their belt, look, I've had to cinch mine up. All right? Why shouldn't we insist that the local and state governments cinch theirs? None of this, we won't have as many raises. Okay? That's not a cut, folks. If you were going to increase spending 10%, you increase it 5%, you still increase spending. Right? That's not a cut. A cut is when you take the old number and you decrease it. Right? We don't see those in government. Go find a state or city budget where that's happened. You can't. It's because we don't demand it.
Well, you said you think, how do we get that conference, we yell, scream, and they do it.
Well, I understand that. Look, they just did it, the Mid-Bay Bridge toll. Okay? Up 50 cents.
as of, you know, as of another couple of weeks, right? And, and here's the thing. I mean, when you think about that, if you're a local resident and you have one of those SunPass transponders, you get screwed at the expense of the person who is here on vacation, because as a percentage increase, your toll increase is higher. Oh, it's only 50 cents. But it was the same way last time as well. Yep. They did the same thing the last time. They raised it 50 cents, and it was more, as a percentage, your toll went up 50%, theirs went up 33. So, you know, who's the one that's supposedly getting the benefit from this thing? I mean, the whole idea of this is these people come into our communities, they spend money here, but they also put infrastructure load on our city. Why are we paying for them to come here and put the load on our city? That doesn't make any sense. It should be the other way around. But we allow it. That's why it happens. We keep sending the people back to office. We keep putting them in that chair right back there in council chambers. Until it changes, we're not going to see it fixed.
But we don't have the option not to vote for Barney, right?
No, we don't. Unfortunately. But here's the thing. If you think that voting for a Republican, though, is going to fix the problem, show me how well that's worked out.
No, but
well, but you know what? There isn't. But here's the thing. There isn't just two left. This is the big lie. Okay. The last time you went and voted in a general election, were there only two names on the ballot? Be straight here, all right? There may have only been two people that you thought you could vote for, but were there only two names on the ballot for President of the United States? There were 5, I believe, in Florida.
But you have to influence the main party.
And as long as you continue to believe that, it's going to continue to happen. So did I, but you know what? Here's the, and you know, but you know what?
Change the people that the Republicans and the Democrats are running.
How are you going to do that?
Just like it's been done.
Where has it actually been effective? Look at what happened. Scott Brown gets in, right? Okay. So show me what just happened not more than a week ago. He caved on the financial reform bill, okay? Okay, how many more times does it have to happen?
Let me tell you something more depressing than that. If you know anything about Washington, it's run by staffers and lobbyists.
I know.
I don't care how many guys you change in that office, that staffer's there forever. I knew staffers up there that were 80 years old.
You're right, but here's another point that goes with this, okay? The lobbyists come in with money, they wine and dine and they talk and they BS, all right? But I got to tell you something. There's one thing they don't do, and there's one thing the corporations don't do, because they can't. They don't vote. You and I vote. We keep sending the same clowns back to D.C. We keep sending the same clowns to the State House. We're the ones that are electing the people that are supposedly representing us. If they don't represent us, why do we keep re-electing them? And then we complain about the results. We have to change who goes. But it may not be, look, if we can't get it done within the Republican Party or within the Democratic Party, then the answer's not found there.
Well, there are people like Jim DeMint and Michelle Bachman, people that are decent. And I think we term limits, everybody knows this, we need. Put anybody in, I don't care who you say.
Yeah. Yes.
We need somebody like him. He had a $29 billion budget. He cut $13 billion out of it.
Yep.
Now, he's a Republican, but he's constitutional.
Yep, and you know what? That's the first guy I've seen that actually said he was going to do that, got voted in, then actually turned around and did it. And you know what? If we actually see that happen this time around, there may be enough time to get it done.
But that goes back to what I talked about originally. We need to tactical events. We need to tell people what we want. We need to go talk to them and vote for those people like Christie. We need to ask them specifically what you're going to do with the agenda. Regardless of what their staff says, we need to find out what they're.
But we also have to make sure that if they don't do it, they're gone.
Exactly.
Because the problem is that we have many times said we want this, we want X, Y, and Z here in Florida and on a national level. And then, like I said, $700 billion bailout, okay? Look, folks, I talked to probably 70 staffers in 70 different congressional offices the week that bill was going on, personally by telephone. All right? I mean, I got a $4,000 phone bill that week, all right, from all the faxes I sent out. It was unbelievable. They actually had my number blocked in some of the congressional offices because they got tired of hearing from it. Every one of those staffers told me the calls that were coming in to their offices were 300 to 1 against that bill. 300 to 1. They passed it anyway, but you know what? They kept their jobs. 300 to 1, you'd think every one of those people would have lost their seat, okay? It was 2 weeks in front of the election. How can you say, well, they forgot? No, they didn't. They said, well, my guy brought me the bacon, so I'm going to send him. That's got to stop. But it's got to be a big shakeup, all right? I mean, look, the Tea Party came around because of this kind of stuff. But this, we have to hold people accountable, and we haven't done it. So, yeah. Yep. Well, if you want to stay up to date on what's going on, you can take a look at market-ticker.org. There's usually 3 or 4 posts a day up there. I've got some cards with it on there. I'll give them to anybody that wants them.
Did you bring cards from your...
Yes, I did. Yeah. So, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll hang around. Thanks.